Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be working on some more cooking demonstrations that are based on the basic methods of cooking videos 1, 2, and 3 that came out before these demonstrations started rolling out. Today we're going to be making breaded chicken breast with a CONCASEE tomato sauce. Method of cooking today that we'll be using is going to be pan frying, and that is a dry cooking method. The methods we'll be covering today will be breading, where I bread a chicken breast. I'll be demonstrating sweating onions, which will be part of the sauce I'm making, as well as concasseing tomatoes, which is probably a term you're not familiar with. So there's a lot of stuff to cover today. I'm gonna start with concasseing tomatoes. So let's get started. So the first step in concasseing tomatoes is to wash the tomatoes and make a water bath. If you're not sure what a water bath is, please take a look at the first video of the 3 videos in the basic methods of cooking videos. Start with a clean bowl. So to prepare a water bath, you start with a lot of ice and you put water in it. Pretty straightforward. This method is so that you can shock a food item into stopping its cooking process. All right, let's prepare the tomatoes and get the water boiling. Now you can do one of 2 things. You could remove this core now, or you could wait until later and remove it in the cutting process. So you just turn them over and you score very shallow. Eliminating the peel and the seeds from tomatoes removes any bitter taste as well as any texture from the skins. This is also a process that you would use if you were intending on canning your tomatoes. All right, it looks like we have some boiling water. Now you just drop the tomatoes in. It shouldn't be too long before you can start seeing the skin pull away from the X's that you made at the bottom of the tomatoes. To blanch means to partially cook items very briefly in boiling water or hot fat. And you can see the skin has started falling away. So this is done. Just going to drop them in the ice water so that the actual meat of the tomato doesn't end up getting overcooked. And then we'll just let that sit for a couple of minutes until they cool down enough to handle, at which point we'll peel, deseed, and dice. Okay, as stated, the first step in a concassee is to remove the skin. See how nice that comes away? And this is the point at which you just cut around the stem area. Get rid of that. When you're doing prep, always make sure that you have a couple bowls around. One to put your scrap in, and then one to hold your item. And then you go to removing the seeds, which is a little bit more difficult. There's a couple different ways you can do this depending on your tomato type, and this is another way you can do it. This is the fastest way, is just to get your fingers in there. It's actually more fun to just get your fingers in there than it is to use a knife. You can squeeze them out. And you don't have to get every single seed. It's not gonna be the end of the world if you get a seed in your sauce. And there you have tomatoes that have been seeded. The next step is to roughly chop them. Just however many sized pieces you want to do. And there you have concassee tomatoes. You could turn it into a soup, a sauce, a salsa. Next we'll move on to sweating onions. Sweating means to cook slowly in fat without browning. And there you have some sweated onions. To start the sauce, I'm going to add some crushed garlic, season it with a little salt and a little pepper. Continue to cook for just a little bit. That's probably good. We'll add the tomatoes, turn the heat down to low, and then we'll let that continue to cook until it's well incorporated. Now for the last couple minutes of this sauce, I'm going to add fresh thyme. You always want to add your fresh herbs towards the end of cooking. And now we'll move on to breading. Okay, so first things first, you want to prep your chicken for breading. You want to pat it down to remove any excess moisture and place it on a covered cutting board. And the plastic is just to protect the cutting board from any of the bacteria the chicken might be carrying. And then cover it with plastic. And then you're just going to want to pound it flat. This is to help the chicken cook evenly once it's been breaded. Alternatively, you could open the fillet up just a bit, like this, if you didn't have a meat mallet, and do it that way. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to pound this out a little bit more because I want it a little bit more even. Okay, now that this is complete, we'll set up the breading station and get to breading. So a proper breading station consists of the plate or container that you have the raw ingredient in, the first dredging, and in this case I am using a combination of coconut flour and almond flour because I'm making this keto today. If you're not on any special diet, you can just use a regular all-purpose flour. Then we have the liquid, which is 1 egg and about a tablespoon of milk. And then for the breading, I'm using crushed up pork rinds. So you can just use panko crumbs or breadcrumbs. And between the two, I most recommend panko crumbs because they're light and flakier and they just do a better job with breading. So the first step is right here with the chicken, and you want to generously season the chicken with salt and pepper. And then you also should have seasoned your flour mixture with a little salt, and your liquid mixture with a little salt, and your pankos with a little salt. So this is a messy endeavor if you've never done it before. And what you want to do is you want to start with one hand that's for your wet and one hand that's for your dry. You touch the chicken with your wet hand, turn it over, get that into all the nooks and crannies. This will help the breading stick if there's not a lot of moisture here. So you move it over to the wet and you coat it really well with that. And then following that into the fourth dish. And if I didn't mention before, you want to make sure that you also have a pan to set your breaded item on to hold it while you bread additional items. Flip. Just press it down in there. Make sure it's fully covered. And then transfer. I always have the problem I run out of coating at the end and then I just have to sort of make it up because I'm always afraid of having too much stuff left over. And if you are looking for a product that's the crushed pork rinds, this is a pretty decent product on the market. Pan frying shares similarities with sauteing and deep frying. The main difference between sauteing and pan frying is the amount of fat used in the pan. The first step for pan frying is to prepare the food, which includes washing and trimming, and completing any other process such as dredging and breading. Step 2 is prepare a draining station where you will place the item after it is cooked. Step 3 is heat a pan with a moderate amount of fat or oil, just enough to cover about 1/3 to half the way up the side of the food item. I am using sunflower oil today as it is an expeller pressed high smoke point oil. If you want to know more about how to choose the right oil for your job, please check out the video on how to select fats and oils for your cooking. The link should be in the description. The temperature of the fat should be slightly lower than that used with sauteing. We'll heat this until my test works out. You can see that that didn't bubble up. That means the oil is not hot enough yet. We'll give it a few minutes and come back. Do another test to make sure that the oil is hot. So one way to test to make sure your oil is hot enough to put the item in is to check and see if it starts to bubble when you put a piece of carbohydrate. I guess in this case, a little of the breading. This looks like I probably want to turn it down just slightly, Because remember, the goal is a hot but slow process to assure that the inside of the chicken breast or the food item that you're cooking is cooked fully. Step 4, add the food to the hot oil, being careful not to drop or splash. Careful not to crowd, as it will decrease the temperature and result in undesired food temperatures. Okay, I'm going to start with one of the chicken breasts. And that's the sound you want to hear. Let's see if I can do 2 at once. And then once I put this in, I'm just going to turn the heat up just slightly, because when you put a food item in hot oil, it'll drop the temperature of the oil. And if the oil temperature gets too low, the breading will absorb the fat, and you'll have a dish that has more fat in it and also has an undesirable texture. Food should crackle and splatter at this point, as this is a sign of rapid vaporization of the moisture on the food surface. 5, fry on one side until browned and carefully flip the item over. All right, you can see along the edge here that it's gotten brown, so I'm going to go ahead and flip that. Usually pan-fried foods are done when they are browned on either side of the item. Move the item to the draining station so that the excess oil is absorbed by the paper towel. And then we'll come back to this when it's done and plate it up and give it a taste. Pan-fried breaded chicken breast with a tomato concassee sauce. Let's give that a taste. Let's cut this in half and see what it looks like. Excellent. All right, let's give this a taste. So juicy. As you can see, I garnished it. As you can see, I garnished it with a little fresh thyme. The great thing about this is you could put a sauce on it of any sort. So you could just skip the cheese and put like a creamy white sauce on top. You could have put any number of ingredients in your sauce, like mushrooms. So that's it for that today. I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned something. Thank you for stopping by and watching my video today. And as always, have a wonderful day.